Some general information. ISO IEC 20001 is a management system standard, and certification is aimed at organizations, not at individuals, that provide service management activities, no matter whether they are provided internally within the organization or externally. It is not possible to certify specific products or services. It is a management system supporting the provision of the services that is certified, not the services themselves. It is not appropriate to certify consultancy organizations that provide best practice advice. So good to kind of keep these general information ideas pertaining to certification. Additionally, in order to achieve certification, an organization needs to be able to demonstrate that it has control of parties involved in the service life cycle. Please refer to supplementary paper section 10 for further information. Now let's kind of talk about applicability 1.2. Clause 1.2 is advisory, not shall statements. All requirements in ISO IEC 20001 are generic and are intended to be applicable to all service providers regardless of type, size, and the nature of the services delivered. An important rule: exclusion of any of the requirements in clause 4 to 10 is not acceptable when a service provider claims conformity. This is the most important rule in the entire standard regarding certification. You cannot pick and choose, no cherry picking. All or nothing. You cannot say we are ISO 20000 certified except for incident management, because we don't like that part. If you claim conformity, you must meet every single requirement in clause 4 through 10. The standard is written to be generic. It applies to a 5-person IT shop and a 50,000 global telco. Arguments like we are too small for this clause are not valid excuses for exclusion. We kind of talked about them in the preceding slide. Scope considerations. When scoping an ISO IEC 20001 certification exercise, due consideration should be given to the geographical aspects. Number one, for instance, as a single office, a group of offices, a region, a country, globally, etc. Number two, organizational aspects such as departments, groups of departments, all departments, etc. And then the service aspect, single service, group of services, section of the service catalog, all services, etc. When we talk about service agreement, we're talking about a service provider seeking certification. When a service provider is seeking certification, the scope of the service is to be audited, should be agreed in advance with the auditor. The agreement is done in form of a service of scope statement, which will be validated by the auditor and referenced in the audit report. The scope will be stated on any subsequent ISO IEC 20000 certification. It is vital that the scope of any certificate is entirely unambiguous and accurate. Let's talk about service provision. The service provider should be able to easily provide clear definition of the scope of service and infrastructure within the scope of the audit. The interfaces between the processes with clarity on how they're completed, on how they're controlled. Isolated processes are not sufficient for certification. Thirdly, the interfaces to other organizations involved in the service delivery, including customers and suppliers, should be provided. Now let's talk about scope. Certification can only be awarded to a single legal entity. Naming of processes is irrelevant. It is their existence that is vital together with their content, quality, and usage. It is also irrelevant whether the services are provided on a commercial or a non-commercial basis. Some additional thoughts. The service provider does not need to own the infrastructure or its components. It is vital at this stage to consider that during an audit, the provider must provide evidence that all requirements of ISO IEC 20001 are being met. By the time of the audit, there will be no exclusions. Some important scope guidelines. The scope statement should be as simple as possible. It should be understandable without detailed knowledge of the service provider's organization. It should include enough information for use in conformity assessment. Be worded as it does not intentionally or unintentionally imply that something is excluded. Something is included if it is excluded. Let's kind of talk about the scope statement further. Scope statement part 1.4.3. The scope statement must include name of the service provider organization unit and the services. It can also consider including technology, customers, service provider location, and customer location. A typical scope statement can take the following form. The service management system of, you could kind of put in the name of the service provider organization unit that supports the provision of, you could include the services from a particular location to a particular customer at a particular customer location. Note part 3 uses the word delivers in place of supports the provision of. Here we see a picture of the relationship with the suppliers. So we have the lead supplier or suppliers providing services to the internal service provider who further provides services to customer A within organization X. Further, the lead suppliers or suppliers are being provided by subcontract suppliers. And this is a slide which kind of highlights the fact that the provider could either be internal or external. And the organization seeking certification are the service providers. They could be internal or external. Internal service provider can provide services to multiple business units for a customer within the organization. And these internal service provider could further be supported by multiple suppliers. Scope statement should be the service management system that supports the delivery of all internal IT services to customer C by the internal service provider of organization X. Another scenario is a scenario where supplier 1 is providing service desk functioning, and the scope statement should read SMS, the service management system that supports the provision of all internal services to customer D by the internal service provider of organization X. So here the application management work for customer E is back office system and outsourced to external supplier 2. The internal service provider has retained all aspects of the infrastructure. Again, if the ISP, internal service provider, has governance of all processes for infrastructure management, then the scope statement is valid. So the scope statement could read the service management system that supports the provision of all infrastructure management services to customer E by the internal service provider of organization X.